Okay, this is just in case everything kind of fails, which sort of happened last week. For today's class, we're going to do the Raven plot map because you guys were able to finish your Raven stanzas last week, which was awesome. Then in class, we watched the Raven Simpsons version. I want to try to redo the comma lesson from last Friday. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a comma lesson for you to watch. And there'll be some practices on commas, and then there'll be a quiz on Schoology. And then your homework is to read The Mask of the Red Death, which is linked here. And I've also got a PDF on Schoology. There's a PDF of the practice commas as well, and the quiz is on Schoology. So I will go ahead and start explaining all of those things. But this video in particular is just going to be the Raven plot map. So let me go ahead and pull that up and follow along with your composition notebook. Go ahead and draw a plot map in your composition notebook to make it look just like mine. And you can pause this and stop it and copy whenever you would like. So the first thing that we're going to start with is, kind of move this window real quick, it doesn't really matter. There we go. Okay. The first thing that I want to start with is the characters in the exposition. So our characters in the Raven are the narrator, the Raven, and Lenore, if we want to count her. She's dead. The setting, this is in the narrator's chamber. The time of year is December. And we know that this is a particularly bleak and hopeless December from what he's told us. The conflict, remember that we have external. So man versus man. Man versus society. Man versus nature. Man versus God. Man versus technology. There's a few others, but then we have internal conflicts. Internal is just one, and that's man versus self. So, which conflict do we have here in the Raven? We definitely have man versus self. His depression over his lost love is his main conflict. This is the biggest issue that he has. We have an external conflict, and all of my classes we sort of had trouble deciding what we wanted to call it, man versus man, as in like the Raven is sort of a man. We didn't really think he would be nature. We did toss around the idea of man versus God because the Raven is sort of like a godlike figure. He's a prophet, a speaker of God, a speaker of truth. But for our sake, we're going to say man versus Raven with man in parentheses, because this is a physical being who has come in and sort of not disrupted him, but basically this is amplifying that. The Raven is there to just simply confirm his depression, and therefore he can never get out of it. So what I like to do is I like to start with the climax. So the climax of The Raven is what I think is stanza 17. In stanza 17, he tells the Raven to leave. Let me make sure you guys can see this. He tells the Raven to leave, but the Raven says no, that he will never leave. You guys can see that. There we go. He tells the Raven to leave, and the Raven says no, he will never leave him. And this is like the most upset that he is, the most angry. So I think that's why we can argue that this is the climax. From here, we basically don't have any falling action. We go straight to the resolution, which is stanza 18. In stanza 18, we learn that he and the Raven are still there in the chamber. Our narrator has a breakdown. His soul is trapped in the shadow of the Raven. And the sad truth that he will never see Lenore ever again. Let's go to our rising action. So we've got the exposition, we have our climax. So filling in the rest is just kind of filling in like basically stanzas 1 through 16, which is a lot, but we're going to try to compact this down. So we know that the story begins with our narrator napping, reading, and there's a knock at the door. He tells the person at the door he's sorry, he's busy, and then we learn why he's sad. He's sad because Lenore, his love, is dead. After this, the knocking continues, and he opens the door, and there's nothing. The knocking moves to the window, and he blames the wind. And I believe he opens the window, I think, is what we get from this, and there's nothing there. However, in stanza 7, very important stanza, the Raven flies in through the window. So the Raven arrives, and he lands on Pallas. And this is significant because Pallas is the goddess of wisdom. So our Raven, who represents death, prophecy, bad omens, he's a messenger. The fact that he lands on Pallas, the goddess of wisdom, is very symbolic that what he speaks is possibly truth or prophetic or evil, or he brings death. But either way, whatever he brings must be truthful because he is on Pallas. So after this, we have a series of stanzas up until stanza 13, and all of these stanzas basically are him sort of wondering and sort of theorizing about why the raven is saying his name nevermore, what he means by it, why is this raven here, etc. So he wonders where he's from, wondering where and what nevermore means. He asks the raven what his name is, and the raven says nevermore. And that sets off a series of sort of him thinking about what this could possibly mean. And then we get to stanza 13. Stanza 13 sort of changes everything because it's sort of a turn where he goes from wondering about this raven, he's sort of charmed, he's beguiled by this raven, and all of a sudden his thoughts return to Lenore. He's sort of sitting in his chair, he's staring at the bird, and then he thinks, oh, Lenore is never going to sit in this chair again. So then in stanza 14, now his thoughts are back on Lenore. He starts to ask the raven a series of questions. The first question is, do you have any nepenthe? Which is a Greek allusion to a drug to forget. Do you have any nepenthe for me to drink so that I can forget, Lenore? The raven says, no, nevermore. Either none exist or I don't have any for you, or both. Then in stanza 15, he asks the raven, is there balm in Gilead? This is a biblical allusion to a cure or a medicine. Is there a cure? Is there a medicine to help me forget, Lenore? The raven says, nevermore. No, there is no cure. None exist, or you can't have any, or all of the above. Stanza 16, he finally says, okay, there's no drug, there's no balm or cure. I'll at least see her in Aden. When I die, I'll see her in the afterlife, right? Like, that's pretty obvious. I'll see her in heaven or paradise when I die, because she's already dead, so I'll see her. The raven says, nevermore. He says, no. So again, this one is particularly surprising because of all the religious references. Is the raven saying that his beliefs are wrong, that there is no paradise, or simply that he won't see her in paradise, or this is a very interesting stanza. But this leads to our climax, in which our narrator finally is so upset with this raven that he tells the raven to leave. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off thy door. And the raven says no. So the raven will never leave. And that ends to our final kind of breakdown of our narrator, who is he is trapped in the shadow of the raven that lies floating on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. So, and we know that this stands as present tense. We have to assume that they're still there together. So this is the raven.